You have stayed in an Airbnb, maybe last month. At checkout, the app showed you a number. Let us say $247 for 3 nights. You paid it, you left a 5-star review, and you never thought about the house again. The host did not get $247. In a lot of cities, after the mortgage, the cleaner, the insurance, the platform fee, and the nights nobody booked, they did not get anything. Some of them paid for the privilege of owning a house that looked busy on Instagram and sat empty on the calendar. There is a number that decides whether that listing made money or cost money. It is not the nightly rate, the Superhost badge, or the 5-star average. It is the empty night. A booked night looks like income. An empty night looks like nothing. That is the lie. An empty night still costs the mortgage, the insurance, the property tax, the internet, and the slow, quiet aging of a house full of furniture nobody slept in. Across the United States, the average Airbnb is empty almost half the year. In some leisure markets, it is empty 2 nights out of 3. This is the story of those empty nights, why almost nobody buying a house for Airbnb does the math against them, and why a company that made $12 billion last year can stay wildly profitable while the person who owns the bed is one slow January away from writing a check to keep the lights on. Start with why anyone signs up, because the offer is genuinely good. You already have a house, or you can buy one. Tourists already need a place to sleep. The photographs do the selling. There is no interview, no fixed shift, and nobody asking why you answered a message at 11 at night. You list the property, you set a price, and the app finds the guests. And in the right market, in the right season, it works exactly like that. A long weekend fills, a holiday week fills, a concert, a wedding, a football Saturday. The calendar turns from white to green, and the payout page starts to look like a second salary. Airbnb has spent 15 years selling that picture. Buy a house, guests pay the mortgage, you visit it twice a year, it appreciates while you sleep. It is the closest thing the internet ever built to a machine that prints rent. That number on the payout page looks like pay. It is revenue. A landlord with a 12-month lease can look at one check and understand roughly what the year produced. An Airbnb host has to wait until the empty nights have taken their share. Most people think an Airbnb host sells hospitality. That is not quite right. Hospitality is how the job feels. Hospitality is what the reviews measure, but hospitality is not the product. A hotel sells rooms it already paid for, in a building designed to be empty some nights and still survive. A host is paid for nights that get booked, and every night that does not get booked still has to be paid for by the same person. So the host is not renting out a lifestyle. They are selling the calendar, 1 square at a time, in pieces small enough that a good July can hide a dead February. Cleaning takes the first visible piece, the rest leaves quietly. The water heater fails. The sofa gets stained, the lawn still grows. The mortgage does not care that nobody came. None of that ever appears as a deduction on the earnings screen. The app counts completed stays. The host lives through every night between them. Somebody needed to put a price on an empty night, and it turns out the market already did. The measurement is almost comically simple. Occupancy is booked nights divided by available nights. AirDNA, which tracks millions of short-term rentals, has put the United States average around 54%. Other trackers land closer to 50. Read that as a business, not a statistic. 54% means the house worked 197 nights and sat empty 168. Those 168 nights still had a mortgage. They still had insurance. They still had property tax. They still had Wi-Fi, because the listing has to look ready even when nobody is coming. Mountain towns that look booked solid in October go dark in April. Beach houses that print money in July sit quiet in January. Cabin markets that YouTube videos treat as gold mines often clear only 30 to 40% of the year. So that is the line. Below it, the booked nights have to carry the empty ones. Above it, the house is a hotel that forgot it is also a home. Now, what a night actually pays. Airbnb likes to say the typical United States host earns around $14,000 to $16,000 a year. That number is real, and it is also a trick. It includes the spare bedroom, the sofa bed, the person who lists 3 weekends a year. AirDNA has put the average listing closer to $900 a month. Full-time listings in strong markets can clear $3,000 to $8,000 a month before costs. Read that fast and it sounds like a career. Then the expenses arrive. A typical 2-bedroom spends $6,000 to $12,000 a year just on cleaning. Utilities run $3,000 to $5,000. Short-term rental insurance is $2,000 to $3,000, roughly double a normal homeowner's policy. Supplies another $1,000. Maintenance is often modeled at 5% of revenue, because strangers wear a house out faster than a family does. Property tax can be $1,500 in Oklahoma and $15,000 in California. Added up, and operating costs eat 35 to 50% of gross revenue before the mortgage even enters the room. That is 3 to 4 times the operating load of a long-term rental. Run it as a real year. $40,000 in bookings looks like a win. After cleaning, utilities, insurance, supplies, maintenance, and the platform cut, you may be holding $17,000. Then the mortgage arrives. In an expensive city, that $17,000 was never going to cover it. Same house, same photographs, same 5-star reviews. The number lost more than half of itself on the way to the bank, and almost nobody notices in July because July is green. The money that leaves does not leave all at once. It leaves in a cleaner invoice, a broken air conditioner, a tax bill, a January with 9 booked nights, and never once inside the app where the earnings are counted. Now walk through an ordinary month, because this is where the empty night starts to bite. The first weekend books at $240 a night. Friday and Saturday fill. Sunday sits open. A Tuesday to Thursday gap appears because the last guest wanted a weekend, and the next guest wants a weekend, and nobody wants the 3 nights in between. You drop the price, nobody takes it. You block the nights to protect your average daily rate, which is a polite way of saying you chose an empty night on purpose. Then a 5-night booking arrives. Cleaning has to happen the same afternoon the last guest leaves, or the next guest writes the review that follows you for a year. The cleaner costs $125 whether the stay was 2 nights or 5. On a 2-night stay, that cleaner is a second mortgage. Added up, 8 booked nights, 22 empty ones, the booked nights paid, the empty ones did not. The house absorbed all of them. That gap is the empty night. It might be January, it might be a Tuesday, it might be a city council that just capped you at 90 nights a year, it might be a new building 3 streets over that listed 16 identical condos last month. Every one of those nights costs exactly the same as a booked one. Same loan, same tax, same insurance. They simply do not pay, and no app in this business shows them as a cost. They are not hidden exactly. They are just never added up anywhere the host can see. The house decides more of this outcome than almost anything the host does. Somebody who inherited a paid-off cabin is running a completely different business from somebody who just put 20% down at 6.75%, and a different one again from somebody who rented a condo and listed it as an Airbnb. 3 hosts can complete identical stays and keep wildly different amounts. For hosts without a house, the internet sold a shortcut called rental arbitrage. Sign a lease, furnish it, list it, keep the spread. The appeal is obvious. You do not need $200,000. You can start this month. But it changes the psychology of the entire job. An owner who has a bad month can leave the house empty and lose the carrying costs they were going to pay anyway. A renter starts the first of the month already owing the landlord. Before a single dollar goes toward their own rent, several bookings have to buy the right to keep hosting, and a $2,000 lease is $24,000 a year, before utilities, before furniture, before the week the building finds out what you are doing and evicts you. The app can be switched off, the lease cannot. Then there is the platform cut, which used to be the part hosts bragged about. For years, Airbnb told hosts the fee was 3%. That was true, in the same way a restaurant bill is the menu price if you ignore tax and tip. The guest was paying another 14% on top. The host saw 3. The guest saw a total that no longer matched the nightly rate. This year, Airbnb is finishing the move to a single host fee. For most hosts, that number is 15.5% taken from the booking, including the cleaning fee. The last independent hosts moved by mid-September. There is no opt-out. On a $1,000 booking, the host now keeps $845 before a cleaner, a tax, or a mortgage sees a cent. Airbnb's logic is that guests book more when the price they see is the price they pay. That may be true. It is also a transfer. The old guest fee hid the platform's take on the traveler. The new fee prints it on the host. Airbnb made about $12.2 billion in revenue last year and still cleared about $2.5 billion in profit. The company is not struggling. The calendar is. Cleaning is the part that looks like a line item and behaves like a second job. Most United States listings still charge a cleaning fee. The average for a 1-bedroom sits around $96. Larger homes often charge $125 to $165. Guests hate it. Hosts need it. Charge too much and the listing dies at checkout. Charge too little and you are subsidizing other people's towels. Here is the trap the fee cannot solve. Cleaning is a per stay cost, not a per night cost. A 2-night booking and a 10-night booking can generate the same invoice. Markets with short stays get destroyed by this. Nashville can look like one of the best revenue cities in America and still have one of the worst capture rates. High nightly rates, short weekends, a fresh cleaning bill every 3 or 4 nights, and a lodging tax over 15% all eat into it. One analysis of 10 major markets found hosts keeping between 52 and 59 cents of every guest dollar after fees, tax, cleaning, and basic operations. Airbnb published a different number. Hosts and guests, it said, generated $93 billion of economic activity in the United States. That headline is not fake. It is just mostly not host income. 3/4 of it is restaurants, Ubers, grocery runs, and souvenirs. Of the dollars that actually move through a booking, more than 40 cents is gone before the host can use them to pay for the building. Now, the part that has the texture of a job and the legal status of a hobby. Superhost is a badge. It is also a treadmill. To keep it, you need a 4.8 rating or better, a 90% response rate inside 24 hours, fewer than 1% cancellations, and at least 10 stays. The assessment comes back every quarter. One bad review, one missed message during a work meeting, one emergency cancellation, and the badge drops. That sounds like a reward for quality. It is also a response time job attached to a house. You do not get paid to answer the question about parking at 1 in the morning. You get punished if you do not. You do not get paid to leave a lockbox code, replace a Wi-Fi router, or write the 5th message explaining how the oven works. The guest thinks they bought a home. They bought access to you. A hotel has a night desk. An Airbnb has your phone. And then there is the account itself, which is the strangest asset in this whole arrangement because the host does not own it. Guests rate hosts, and the average sits behind every search result. A low rating, an expired permit, or one serious complaint can bury the calendar. There is a review process. An appeal does not generate bookings while the listing is offline. Most complaints do not end a hosting career, but the shape of the risk is worth stating plainly. The host owns the house, pays for the furniture, carries the insurance, and absorbs every operating cost, while access to guests sits in an account controlled by someone else. The job also asks for work that nothing pays for and risk that looks covered until it is not. Airbnb advertises air cover, up to $3 million in damage protection, up to $1 million in liability. Those numbers are real, and they are also not an insurance policy. Airbnb itself says so. Wear and tear is excluded. Lost nights after a disaster are barely covered. And your ordinary homeowner's policy will often deny the entire claim the moment it learns the house was a rental. That distinction sounds academic until a party happens, or a clogged septic tank, or a guest who leaves with the television. At that point, the question is not what the weekend earned. It is which policy applies while a damaged house earns nothing at all. Neighbors are the quieter version of the same problem. One complaint can start a permit review. One HOA letter can end the listing. One local news story about a party house can write a rule that applies to every host on the street. New York's Local Law 18 is the extreme version. Entire apartments without the host present were taken off the nightly market. The listings that remain are mostly 30-day, stays wearing an Airbnb URL. Median annual revenue sits around $22,000, among the lowest of any large American market on some of the most expensive housing on earth. San Francisco caps many non-primary residences at 90 nights. Denver and Austin layered licensing on top of prices that already do not work. The host can do everything right and still lose because the zip code changed the product. But the biggest cost in this entire job is the one that never sends an invoice on the month you bought the dream. Furnishing a 2-bedroom so it photographs like the ads is often $15,000 to $30,000. Duplicate sheets. A couch that survives 12 strangers a month. A coffee machine people will mention in the review. None of that is a house payment. All of it starts dying the week the first guest arrives. Then there is the purchase itself. This year, the average 30-year mortgage sat around 6.75%. Put 20% down on a median house in Denver or Austin or Miami, and the annual loan payment alone can exceed what the median listing in that city brings in. Arroy ran this model across 15 United States markets. Broken Bow, Oklahoma cleared about $29,000 a year after mortgage and operating costs. The Poconos did the same. Denver lost about $20,000. Austin lost $15,000. Miami lost $11,000. San Francisco lost so much they had to take it off the chart, somewhere around $56,000 a year, because the mortgage on a $1.2 million house cannot be paid by a listing that earns $36,000. Without a mortgage, almost every market still produces income. With one, the house is not a business. It is a bet that tourists will outrun the bank. The photographs get paid for once. The cleaner gets paid per stay. But the largest cost of the whole operation gets paid every month, including the months the calendar is white, and it gets paid again years later. On the afternoon, you try to sell a house that has had 400 strangers sleep in it. That delay is not a detail. It is the reason this business model spread at all. The income is lumpy and visible. The main cost is fixed and boring. Almost every host who quits saying the numbers stopped making sense is describing the moment those two things finally met. None of this makes hosting a mistake for everyone. That would be lazy and it would be wrong. If you already own the house, if it is already costing you money whether anyone sleeps there or not, and you rent it while you travel, or you list a spare suite, or you live in a market where hotels are scarce and weekends are violent with demand, the arithmetic can genuinely work. You are selling capacity you are going to waste. A teacher can host in the summer. Somebody who bought 10 years ago at 3% interest is playing a different sport from somebody who bought last spring. For those hosts, Airbnb does not need to replace a salary. It only needs to convert empty nights into cash, and that is a much easier target to hit. The person this damages is the one who did the opposite, who decided this was going to be the job, who bought a second property specifically because a YouTube video said the guests would pay the note, because now the loan payment is part of the cost structure and a slow month does not pause it. Property managers will take 15 to 30% of gross to make the phone stop ringing. On a $35,000 year, that fee is $5,000 to $10,000, enough to flip a thin market from break even to red. Self-managing keeps the margin and costs 10 to 20 hours a month, which is a part-time job that does not look like one until you try to go to dinner without the phone. And the people in that finance position are usually not there because they compared 15 markets in a spreadsheet. They are there because the barrier to entry looked almost zero, the photos looked like freedom, and nothing else was going to start paying them this year. That last part gets left out of nearly every video about this. The alternative was not a better investment. The alternative was watching house prices move without them. Location changes the answer more than pillows do. A cabin 3 hours from Dallas, in a town with cheap land and no real hotel row, can still print $29,000 a year after everything. A condo in Austin cannot, not at the median price, not with 11,000 other listings competing for the same weekends. Gatlinburg has the most visited national park in the country next door and still only works if you did not overpay for the cabin. Even the comparison everyone uses, Airbnb versus a normal tenant, depends entirely on where you are standing. In Broken Bow, short-term rental net can beat long-term rental by 250%. In Denver, the long-term tenant wins. In San Francisco, the long-term tenant wins by a third. The internet talks about Airbnb like it is one business. It is thousands of local businesses wearing the same app. The hosts who do best treat the app as a storefront rather than an employer. They know their cost per empty night. They refuse to buy a house whose mortgage needs July to survive January. They run 30-day stays in the dead months instead of lighting the cleaner on fire for 2-night gaps. And they stop when the numbers stop working, which is the hardest habit of all, because an empty calendar feels like a personal failure, and the app is designed to make lowering the price feel like the only adult response. This argument is also newer than people think, which is why so many hosts are still stuck inside the old one. In 2020 and 2021, travel restarted, hotels were short-staffed, and a cheap mortgage could turn almost any spare house into a story. People bought condos they had never seen. Influencers filmed coffee on porches they did not live on. Entire zip codes filled with listings that all promised the same thing: the house pays for itself. Then the houses arrived on the market at the same time. Supply grew faster than weekends. Nightly rates had to fall to keep occupancy from falling faster. Cities woke up and wrote rules. Insurance companies noticed. Mortgage rates doubled. The Superhost next door became 14 Superhosts next door. Airbnb, the company, kept growing. Nights booked kept growing. Host profit is not the same variable. A platform can add listings forever. A neighborhood cannot add weekends. Hotels learned the lesson too. Extended stay brands and old motels with better photos are competing for the same traveler who used to feel clever for booking a house. Guests got tired of cleaning fees and lockboxes. Airbnb itself is pushing longer stays and hotel inventory, which is another way of saying the original product, a spare room in someone else's life, is no longer the product. The risk is not that Airbnb disappears next year. It is that the host holds a very expensive, very illiquid asset tied to a market that can shift faster than a mortgage balance, while the company holds the guests, the search ranking, and the right to change the fee. A part-time host can unlist the week the economics turn. Somebody with 29 years left on a loan cannot. So here is the whole thing in one line. 54% is what a year actually books. Roughly half the nights pay nothing. The largest expense in the job does not care which half, and the amount a guest pays for any given stay is no longer the amount the host can use to keep the house. None of those 4 facts are secret. They are published by AirDNA, by city councils, by Airbnb, and by the hosts themselves. They are simply never in the same place at the same time, and there is exactly one person in this arrangement whose income depends on adding them up. Every other lodging business in the economy has somebody else absorbing the empty nights. The hotel owns 100 rooms, so Friday covers Monday. The inn has a night clerk already on payroll. The resort sells the wedding and the off-season together. Here, the single most expensive piece of equipment in the entire operation is owned by the person with the least diversification, and it is being carried at a cost that only becomes visible on a January statement. Next time you stay in one, and the trip ends, and the app asks you for a review, remember that the number on your receipt and the number on theirs are not the same number, and that somewhere underneath both of them, there is a night nobody booked. The guest never sees it. The app does not put it on the main screen. The host pays for it anyway. That is the empty night.